Welcome back, America, to Sound Retirement Radio, where we bring you concepts, ideas, and strategies designed to help you achieve clarity, confidence, and freedom as you prepare for and transition through retirement. And now, here is your host, Jason Parker.
America, welcome back to another round of Sound Retirement Radio. You're listening to episode number 476. The title is, Will Social Security Be There For Me? I was at a speaking engagement this week, and I received several questions from the audience about Social Security. Questions like, when should I start Social Security, at 62 or 67? How do spousal benefits work? Will Social Security be there for me? So in today's podcast, Tim and I discuss these important questions. We also talk about a new survey from the Reagan National Institute that found many Americans believe affluent households should bear more of the cost of funding entitlement programs. As always, I'll include the links to the articles and the resources that I mentioned in today's show at soundretirementplanning.com. Just click on episode number 476. The title is, Will Social Security Be There For Me? We're also hosting a special webinar on Social Security on how to integrate it into your retirement plan. If you'd like to attend and see how we help our clients determine the right time to claim Social Security benefits, simply visit the show notes and click on the webinar registration link. Before we get into today's podcast, let's start out by renewing our minds. Matthew 6:34, therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. And of course, something to put a smile on your face. What kind of music do balloons hate? Pop music. Why did the ice cream truck break down? Because it drove over some rocky road. Okay, and so without any further ado, let's get into this conversation about Social Security. It's my good fortune to welcome Tim Brink back onto the program. Tim's a certified financial planner with Parker Financial. He's somebody, he and I both, we walk life with a lot of people. We help them make decisions about Social Security. Tim, welcome back to Sound Retirement Radio.
Thanks, Jason. Good to be back with you.
I'm so glad to have you here. You know, I had a speaking engagement last night, and we had a lot of people asking questions about Social Security. Like, should I start it at 62 or 67 or 70? And one of the people asked, will Social Security be there for me when we need it? So I thought it would be a good time to just circle back around, talk about Social Security. The other thing is there tends to be a lot of fear mongering out there, a lot of people trying to scare people about Social Security. There was this new Reagan National Economic Survey that was published recently that talks about potential ways to fix Social Security. So I want to, at the end of our program today, I want to circle back and talk about some of these ideas that they have about how Social Security is running into problems right now, but also some of the ideas that have been proposed for how to fix it. The first thing I just want to, at a high level, when you're meeting with people and you're talking to them about retirement and cash flow, Social Security, from my experience, has been a hot topic. What do you find out there when you're talking to people about Social Security?
Yeah, Jason, I'm glad we're having the conversation because certainly as we meet with people, it is common for us to have questions that are brought up regarding Social Security. Everyone knows that there's question marks about the funding, and we'll circle back to that in terms of just some of the fears that are out there. But one of the things we often tell our clients, in a big part of why we do the work that we do, is let's not just make decisions based on fear. Let's look at the information. Let's do an analysis. And there's a lot of pieces here. So Social Security, is a great benefit. And what we want to do is help people get the most out of it. Yeah. And we'll dive in a little bit more about the ins and outs of what that means and the thoroughness of the analysis we do. But certainly as we meet with people, this is one of the big topics that people are asking questions about. When should they start it? And when you answer that question, there's all kinds of different thoughts about Social Security that people are, have in their minds, the suppositions they have about what's going to happen with it, and thinking that should then inform their decision on the timing of it. And so we look at a little bit more in depth of that and try to help people come up with a really good decision, because it is a big decision you make when it comes to retirement.
Well, let's start with the very first question that I had last night, which is people are trying to decide the right time to start Social Security. And what are the ages? How does that work?
Yeah, so I always just start with telling people, okay, here's the window. You've got between age 62 and 70. 62nd birthday is the very earliest that you can start. 70th birthday is going to be the latest. And somewhere in there is going to be the ideal time for your situation. And so that's, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, why does it matter? I mean, why doesn't everybody just start right at 62 as soon as they become eligible?
Yeah, and that's so we've got to understand that 67, if depending on when you're born, but for most folks that are retiring now, age 67 is considered full retirement age. So to get your full benefit, you've got to wait until age 67. So if you take it at 62, what's going to happen is you're taking a reduced benefit. It's going to be reduced every year you're taking it before 67. So you start earlier, you're going to have more years of getting paid Social Security, but it's going to be less of a payment. Where you defer till 70, after that age 67 for retirement age, it's going to go up 8% annually. So to max out your monthly benefit, you're going to want to defer till age 70. So, you know, everyone's situation is different, and that's why there's no one size fits all answer for that, because people have different benefit amounts, people have different life expectancies. There's a lot that goes into finding that ideal time. But that's the downside. If we look at downside of starting at 62 is you get less of a benefit that's going to last the rest of your life. Downside of waiting till 70 is if you die at 71, you've left a lot of money that you missed out on Social Security wise. So that's why it's important to consider all these different factors that go into the calculation.
Yeah, and I think it's also important when we say full retirement age at 67, some people get confused and they think, you mean I can't retire until I'm 67? And when you retire is completely a different decision from when you start Social Security. I mean, we're just trying to figure out, at the end of the day, retirement's all about cash flow, and we want to optimize and maximize cash flow. So 67 is when you don't take a reduction for starting benefits for most people today, but that doesn't have anything. When we have a lot of people that retire at 57 or 58 or 59 or 60, and they don't start Social Security till 70. So I just want to make sure our listeners understand that when you retire and when you start Social Security, those are two different conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. You may have a 25 to 30-year retirement. So, that funding for year one is going to possibly be different than year 15. And so that Social Security income is going to be part of your retirement plan, but it may not be your funding for year one if you've got savings in retirement that you've built a 401k and IRA, things that you can draw from earlier in retirement before that starts.
Yeah. And of course, 67 is full retirement age. If you start at 62, you're going to take a permanent reduction. That's 30%. So if your benefit had been $1,000 that was going to start at 67, and now you started at 62, you're looking at only receiving $700 per month. And there's a lot that goes into that. Okay, so when to start Social Security, it's really an important decision. But we can't make it just based on rules of thumb. Like we can't just say, well, everybody should start at 62 or everybody should start at 67. And when you do the analysis, when you crunch the numbers on this, I'm actually always surprised because every client situation is so unique about the right time for them to start Social Security. Unfortunately, we can't just give a rule of thumb and say, well, everybody start at this point. And I think that's what we really want to emphasize is that it's your plan that should help make this decision. And if we're going to have a plan, we always have to start the plan with the right questions. And the question that we always start with is, what's the purpose of the money? What are we trying to accomplish? Like, are we trying to get the most money out of Social Security over two people's lifetimes? Are we trying to optimize your assets so that you're leaving behind the most wealth to the next generation? Are we trying to structure your plan so that you're paying the least amount of money in taxes over your lifetime? I mean, depending on what somebody's purpose is, what the purpose of the money is really going to determine a lot of these decisions. But the next thing I wanted to talk about is the tax efficiency of Social Security. One of the reasons it makes it a really powerful benefit is that it's tax efficient income. Will you take a minute and talk about that?
Yeah, well, and one thing that people don't know is to start out with, when you're talking about adjusted gross income, it's up to 85%. So, at the most, 85% of your Social Security dollars are going to be taxed. If you're lower income, it's possible that only half of it is taxed. And so from that aspect, if you're comparing that to, maybe a distribution from an IRA that's 100%, it is tax efficient income. And thinking about the tax implications is part of why we want to look at optimizing instead of just saying, okay, what gets the most out of Social Security? And really, we would think, well, what gets the most after tax out of Social Security?
Yeah, that's really good. And, we've even seen situations, especially early in retirement, where people might start Social Security early and then they're taking withdrawals from non-qualified accounts. Like maybe they have a bunch of money at bank CDs, so they have a little bit of interest income. and none of their Social Security is taxed. But then what happens for some people is there's this surprise that hits them when they have to start taking their required minimum distributions. And now all of a sudden they've got this large sum of income that's coming in from their retirement accounts, and all of their Social Security becomes taxable. And all of a sudden they're getting hit with a ton of taxes. So when we talk about Social Security being tax efficient, it's because we're thinking about financial planning, retirement planning holistically. We're not just thinking about how to make your investments work the best way possible. We're thinking about how much of your money are you going to pay in taxes now, and how much money are you going to pay in taxes over your lifetime. And optimizing just for paying the least amount of money in taxes in the current year isn't always the best strategy if ultimately what we're trying to do is pay the least amount of money in taxes over an entire lifetime, not just worried about the current year. So I think that's one of the reasons we emphasize that Social Security is really a tax efficient way to generate cash flow. The other thing that still surprises me, we get people that come into the office that don't understand spousal benefits. They don't understand that it's possible that your spouse may have a benefit even if they've never worked. Do you want to take a minute and just talk about that?
Yeah, definitely. That is one that is, I would say, misunderstood. Is people think, "Oh, I've been a stay-at-home mom. I'm not going to have any benefit," but they don't realize, well, maybe your spouse has worked and has a full benefit, that you're going to get 50% of that when they file for their benefit, and so that's a pleasant surprise for folks who didn't know that. But that's why it's always important, even if you have not worked much and don't have you're not qualified under Social Security, meaning you've got the required amount of quarters and everything, then you still, if you've got a spouse that's been married over a certain period of time, you're going to get that spousal benefit that's going to get you some type of benefit.
Yeah. And like you said, it's 50% of what the full retirement benefit would have been for the spouse. So let's say in an example, this one spouse, we'll say the wife never worked. She stayed at home and raised the family, raised the kids, which, as you and I both know, that's very hard work. So we shouldn't say never worked in the workforce and paid into Social Security. But so the husband's Social Security at full retirement age would be $3,000 per month. Well, the wife's eligible for a Social Security benefit based on his earnings record. So she would be eligible for $1,500 per month, 50% of his benefit. So they may be going into retirement thinking they only have $3,000 a month of Social Security. And then after going through the planning process, they realize, oh, we're actually going to have $4,500 a month of Social Security. And that gets them, that provides a much stronger baseline for the cash flow. Again, retirement's all about cash flow. But the other thing I wanted to talk about is survivor benefits, because this is another great feature of Social Security, is understanding what happens to Social Security when you're in a married couple and one person dies. So will you take a minute and talk about survivor benefits?
Yeah. So whenever you've got a spousal couple and one dies, the lower of the two benefits is going to go away. And so, that's one of the things when I'm meeting with people, I like to start with that in terms of when we're talking about optimizing. If you've got one spouse that's got a higher benefit amount, maybe one spouse was self-employed and just didn't have as much taxable income for Social Security. I really like to emphasize trying to max out one of those benefits for the sake of longevity, because if one of them passes away, the remaining spouse, they're going to get that higher benefit amount for the rest of their life. So you and I are both husbands, just thinking about, okay, how can I take care of my wife if something were to happen to me? Well, being able to maximize that benefit is a great way of doing that. And so just thinking through, you've got each person's benefit, but as a team, how can you maybe get that one benefit that's going to be guaranteed for your life in case one spouse passes and the other lives a longer life for a good number of years after that? That's certainly a situation that I think plays out more often than people plan for. And we've got a lot of widows that we serve. And from a financial planning perspective, it's very rare that both spouses pass away around the same time. Normally there's one that has a longer life. And so one way to prepare for that is maybe thinking, okay, how do we maximize that one benefit so that that's going to last for either spouse if they're going to have a longer life.
So using the example that we just used, husband has $3,000 a month. The wife never paid into Social Security, but she gets the spousal benefit of $1,500 per month. Combined, they have $4,500 per month to start. What happens now? The husband dies, Tim. What's going to happen with that $4,500 per month that they had been receiving?
Yeah, so the surviving wife in that case would get the $3,000 benefit. She would get the husband's benefit. You're not gonna be able to keep two. You'll have the basically the rest of the year when they pass away, but then after that, it's going to be whatever the higher of the two is. So in that case, that's where if the husband were to defer and get an 8% increase, that 3,000 then becomes 24% more than that 3,000. So that's where that can be beneficial for just that survivorship. Thinking about it as longevity insurance by maximizing the benefit.
Yeah, that's great. So we have to be planning for when one person passes away, that surviving spouse is going to see a reduction in income. They had been receiving $4,500 per month. Now they've got $3,000 per month. But you just referenced the delayed retirement credits, that 8% per year. And that is part of what makes this complicated. And I found, like in YouTube, when I've posted YouTube videos about Social Security, people feel so strongly about this subject. I mean, some people are just adamant. You should start Social Security right when you're eligible at 62 in 1 month. Other people feel very strongly that you're leaving money on the table. If you have longevity in your family, you should wait till 70. But let's talk in a little bit more detail about this trade-off, starting at 62, 67, or 70, and those delayed retirement credits that you just referenced for the spouse with the higher earnings.
Well, let's just kind of in a scenario if someone's retiring at 60, now they've got to replace their income. And so, at 62, part of that replacement income could be Social Security, or it could be 100% maybe portfolio withdrawals. If they don't have a pension, then all of it's going to come from their retirement savings. And so by deferring, what you're doing is you're waiting till 70, you're going to maximize that benefit. So from 70 on, you're going to have more replacement income coming from Social Security that's going to be guaranteed. The downside is from 62 to 70, you're going to be having to supplement that from withdrawals from the portfolio. And so by starting at 62, you can allow yourself to be able to keep more in your retirement savings. And I like to, as we work with people, just ask them specifically, what gives you a little bit more security? Having a higher monthly payment that is guaranteed for your life, or having more savings in your retirement accounts? For some people, you've worked all your life and you've seen that amount saved, it's harder for them to take distributions from that balance because they're just savers. So for them, starting at 62 is a good trade-off. For others, getting that guaranteed income that they know, okay, once I get to 70, I'm not going to have to touch my investments much at all. That then becomes the benefit. And it just reminds me of as we meet with people, we work with a lot of engineers. And so sometimes when we've got an engineer, it's like, okay, here's the paper answer. We've got spreadsheets. Here's all the numbers broken down, scenario A, B, C, trying to find to the dollar. Okay, what's the best outcome? But I do find a lot of times as we talk with people, maybe they want to spend more early on because they know they're going to vacation. And so starting that income maybe on paper isn't going to be the most dollar wise, but it just fits their retirement plans better. And so that's, those are the things that we're balancing out between maybe the paper answer and the emotional answer.
So good.
What we want to do is provide them good information and data so that, again, they can make the best decision for them. And sometimes that best decision is, okay, here's what the paper answer is. Here's the full analysis and how we can get every dollar out of this the best we can. Sometimes it's, okay, here's really what fits what we want to do in retirement better.
Yeah. The behavioral side of finance is so important. It's not just what we think or what we know to be true, but it's what we believe or how we think about what's happening in the world, and how the behavioral side, the emotional side, really impacts our sense of well-being in making some of these decisions. And that brings me to the next question. So, ultimately, one of the reasons people feel so strongly about this, Tim, is that they're concerned that they're going to run out of money in retirement. It's probably the number one question that people have. It's like, have I saved enough? Can I actually stop working and know that I'm going to be okay for the rest of my life? On our Social Security statement every year, there's always a little blurb from the Social Security's trustees report that talks about how Social Security is doing. There's a piece that the Social Security Administration puts out called Will Social Security Be There For Me? And I'll include a link to this in the show notes. But what it says is, even if legislative changes are not made before 2034, we will still be able to pay 83% of scheduled benefits. And that's as of June 2026. So people are concerned. They hear all this fear mongering. Social Security is not going to be there for me. And the Social Security Administration every year is saying, no, it's still going to be there for you. We just might have to reduce benefits by 17% at a future point. So when people are trying to make this decision, though, and they know that there's this potential, it just seems like a few years out now. 2034 is right around the corner. How do we help people navigate that, Tim? How do you think about this when you're meeting with folks?
Yeah. Well, let's just kind of so the term that you hear and that is used is insolvency. Social Security will become insolvent in the future, and then there'll have to be cuts. And what does that mean? What that means is that right now you've got payroll deductions that are funding the vast majority. 87% is what you just shared with us, which means that other 13% to fund current benefits is coming from the Social Security Trust Fund. And when they talk about insolvency, means that trust fund no longer has reserves to be able to fund that at a 13%. So, but just when you hear that term insolvency, it makes it sound like, okay, bankruptcy, this means this has got zero, no more benefits going forward. What that means is just that there's not that supplement unless Congress legislation does something to resolve that issue. And we'll talk more about that. That 87% is going to continue to be funded. So sometimes, what we've talked with people and they want to go with the worst case scenario from a financial plan. We don't even want to put Social Security in our financial plan. And it's like, hold on, that's a little bit of an extreme case, because we know that even if it's just the current payroll deductions that you're going to be able to have, close to 80% at the very least of your benefit. So we still want to be thinking rationally about what can we do with these dollars. You've got a benefit that you've earned. No one is saying it's going to go away. I always tell people, and I'm sure you would say something along this, we want to go with what we know, not with what we don't know. And right now what we know is this is the benefit that's promised. If they have to reduce it, it would be reduced to this amount. That's what we know.
Exactly.
And so
yeah.
And so until something changes, let's stick with what we know. That's perfectly rational. And let's not go, well, you and I, when we do planning, and our philosophy is let's hope for the best, plan for the worst. I think, it's still reasonable to say, okay, worst case scenario is that benefits have this slight reduction, not that they completely go away.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the things that really makes the work that we do so unique is that we developed in-house software to help crunch these numbers, right? We're not just, these aren't rules of thumb. It's not, well, here's my opinion. We actually crunch the numbers. And one of the things we built into our retirement planning software is, okay, well, let's just see if you do have a reduction in your benefits in the year 2034 by 17% or 20%, how does that impact your ability to survive retirement? And what do those numbers look like? And like you say, we use really conservative assumptions from the beginning. And so if we can show, hey, you're going to be okay, even if there's a reduction in benefits, man, that just makes people sleep better at night. And I'm reminded that our purpose is to deliver clarity, confidence, and freedom to people. And there's a lot of people out there, especially on YouTube and social media, where they get compensated by having eyeballs on their content that they're creating. And the more they're just trying to get you to watch so they can get advertising revenue. And that's not good planning. That's just fear mongering. One of the things this document says, though, is they say transforming to meet the needs of our customers. And they say the OASI and the DI trust funds have reached the brink of depletion of asset reserves in the past. However, in 1977 and 1983, Congress made substantial changes to the program that resulted in the $2.56 trillion in the trust fund today. So it's not like these challenges this is the first time we've ever faced these challenges as a country. We've faced them in the past. We've solved the problems in the past. And I'm confident that we're going to continue to solve the problems in the future, because nobody wants to see people that are retired that aren't working anymore, unable to pay their rent or their electric bill or whatever, put food on the table.
Well, that's a great point, Jason. In 1983, when they passed legislation to change Social Security and address this insolvency issue, it wasn't years like we are. It was months away from insolvency. So, there's a precedent that, it may get to the last hour, and that's kind of how sometimes Congress works, but it did get resolved. There was a mutual interest in seeing this situation taken care of and having a solution that could then get us to where we are now. So there's good reason to believe that same thing will happen again in the future.
Absolutely. before we get into the Reagan National Economic Survey, I want to talk about the fact that Social Security is an inflation-adjusted benefit, meaning that it's going to increase every year with inflation based on the consumer price index. And so a lot of times people aren't taking into consideration that this isn't static income. It increases over time, which really can create a wonderful benefit for people. So it's tax efficient, it's inflation adjusted, there's survivor benefits, there's spousal benefits, there are delayed retirement credits. Like we were saying, there's a lot that goes into the equation. But ultimately, the only way to really make an informed decision is by having a comprehensive financial plan that you're working from and answering the question, what's the purpose of the money? What am I trying to accomplish with designing this plan? So with that, let's talk about the Reagan National Economic Survey. This has been in the headlines. I've seen it on YouTube talking about the fact that some people are saying, if we have to fix Social Security, how are we going to fix it? So a couple of things I want to talk about with this Reagan National Economic Survey. First of all, there were only a little more than 1,000 people that were interviewed and asked questions. So this is still a relatively small sample size of people. Ultimately, what they're trying to understand is how should we fix Social Security? And they provided them with a couple of different options. So Tim, I'm going to share just a brief snippet from this survey, and then I'll ask you to chime in and share your thoughts on it. But when the question is framed somewhat differently, and this is from the report, it says, one policy enjoys majority support, means testing of benefits for the affluent. When asked to choose between having their taxes increased by $1,500, having existing retiree benefits cut by $5,000, and cutting benefits to moderately high net worth retirees by $15,000, majorities uniformly chose the last option. 71% of respondents endorsed this approach, including 75% of Democrats, 72% of independents, and 66% of Republicans. Even 60% of those currently earning more than $200,000 per year prefer this to other options. There's widespread agreement, including among the affluent, that means testing is preferable to broad-based tax increases. So that's what this survey shows as one solution for fixing Social Security. What are your thoughts when you hear that?
Well, first, let me just kind of define means testing, because we may have some listeners that are going, what does that mean by means testing? And essentially that indicates a reduction or completely eliminating a monthly benefit for retirees. They would have higher income or have substantial wealth or assets. Right now, Social Security is a universal entitlement. Everyone is paid into Social Security. Everyone then receives a benefit. What this is advocating for with means testing is it would then become a needs-based safety net in a sense. It would be for the those below a certain poverty level, even though everyone would pay into it. If you paid into it, but you were affluent, essentially it was just another tax. It wouldn't actually be a benefit. It would become means testing is like welfare. It is needs-based. And that would be a vast different way to go about the Social Security benefit. So that's what means testing is. And when we look at the individual study, an important piece there, because folks are listening, and if they haven't read it, people were presented with three options. Option one, have their benefits reduced by $1,500. Oh, excuse me, $1,500 would be have your taxes increased by $1,500 a year. Option two is reducing benefits by $5,000 a year. So either increase taxes or reduce the benefit. Option three is you've got the moderately affluent, they would have their benefits reduced. In other words, for most people, or those who are not classified as moderately affluent, their benefit's going to stay the same. And what's interesting is we look into the nitty gritty of the survey is it doesn't define what moderately affluent is. So even when it shares the information about those who are higher than earning more than 200% per year, 60% are in favor of means testing. Because it doesn't actually give a threshold of here's moderately affluent, those people may be making the assumption that even making $200,000 a year, that they're not in the category of moderately affluent. Moderately affluent is probably someone who makes more than I do. And so, everyone can kind of define it that way. And so when presented the three options, well, that sounds the best. Somebody else will fund, people who can afford to give up their benefit will afford to give it up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, common with what we see oftentimes about people's solution for government shortfall. What I think is interesting in the survey, the next section after that three option survey they give, as it says, when given the choice to raise taxes or cut benefits. So instead, you've only got two choices, either raise taxes or cut benefits. The latter, or cutting benefits, wins 2-1. So more people are in favor of cutting benefits if it doesn't raise their taxes. So what we can draw from that, in a sense, most people would say, hey, I want the benefits to be cut, but only from those who can afford to have them cut. We don't want to raise taxes unless people can afford to pay the taxes. So you kind of just find that that's where people are at in terms of their solutions.
Yeah, and this is a limited set of ideas for how to fix Social Security. I mean, I just always think back, when Social Security was first started and those dollars were coming in, if we weren't restricted to only owning government bonds and we could have invested those, if we could have had our own sovereign wealth fund in the United States and that money has been invested all these years, we wouldn't have any Social Security problem at all right now. We'd be overflowing with money if that money was invested. Or the idea of raising the retirement age, so maybe you have to be older, or maybe increasing the cap, because right now we cap how much of your income can be taxed for Social Security. So maybe that cap goes up so that more of your income is taxed. So there's a lot of different ways out there that Social Security can be fixed. Again, I think for our listeners, the people that we serve, what we want them to take away is there's a discussion, there's conversation happening right now about how to fix Social Security so that when we get to the year 2034, we're not seeing a reduction in benefits by 17%. I'll share this final key findings from this report. We'll put the report in the show notes, Tim, so if anybody wants to go and read it for themselves. But here's the key findings. Americans want the affluent to foot the bill for entitlements. Means testing Social Security has bipartisan supermajority support, including among high-income respondents. 71% overall, including 60% of those earning more than $200,000 per year, prefer cutting Social Security benefits for high net worth retirees over either raising their own taxes or cutting current retirees' benefits across the board. So the interesting thing that we're grappling with is, like you said, nobody's really defining what high net worth means. Does that mean you have a house that's worth $500,000 and you have $500,000 in retirement accounts? Does it mean you're a billionaire? We don't know. But the thought is, or what the data is showing in this very limited pool of participants, is that most people would rather see those with more pay more in some way. And we're really seeing that across the board. Here in Washington State, the legislature just passed this new state income tax on people that they call it the millionaire tax, people that have earned more than $1 million a year of income. A couple of years ago, we had the new capital gains tax passed in our state. We're seeing estate taxes increase as a result. So there's definitely a movement right now within the country, it seems like, from my perspective, that our legislatures, whether it's state or federal, are trying to find more dollars. And that typically means taxes are probably going to go up in the future. It could mean that. What we know right now, though, is that we have some of the lowest tax rates in the history of our country. And there's this incredible opportunity to do tax planning. And part of that planning includes this decision on when to start Social Security. So whether we're talking about gifting or Roth conversions or qualified charitable distributions or when to start Social Security, I mean, this is all part of the fabric of what makes up a really good financial plan, a really good retirement plan. But Tim, it's been so good to have you on the show again today. Any final thoughts that you've been thinking about when it comes to Social Security and some of the things that have been proposed about how it gets fixed?
Yeah, well, I just think, to go back to what we started with, that Social Security, this benefit for many retirees is going to be a huge cog in the retirement wheel. It is going to be a huge part of the cash flow plan. And that's why it's so important to the work that we do, where we are looking at it from all the different angles, and maybe you can even talk. I know we're wrapping up, but you've built this tool, Retirement Budget Calculator. You're the architect of that. How does that differ than just maybe going on a website, putting in my benefit amount if I start at this age or this age? What is, when we talk about holistic planning, how does that change just looking at Social Security in a silo, in a sense, versus as part of the bigger complete plan?
That's probably one of the biggest mistakes people make, because there are a lot of free Social Security calculators out there that show you how to optimize Social Security over your lifetime or your spouse's lifetime by doing something like a simple break-even analysis. How much how much you're going to earn in Social Security, and when do you start it, and how long you're going to live, and here's when you should start it. And the problem with that is you're making decisions about Social Security in a vacuum. You're saying, I'm only looking at this one piece of my financial life to make the decision. And what we did, which I believe is so much different than the way that most of the world looks at this. And this is one of the things that makes our software so unique and the tools that we have available to help the people we serve, is we're looking at it completely holistically. We're looking at how it's going to affect your wealth, how it's going to affect your taxes, how it's going to affect the Social Security. And you really want to understand how all of those pieces are working together before you make a decision about when to start Social Security. You don't want to just look at Social Security in isolation. I'm glad you brought that up. That's really important.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, Social Security is going to be a big cog in the machine, but it's only one cog. And I'm just thinking about conversations where we're not only talking about optimizing Social Security, we're also talking about Roth conversions and when and how much should be done there. And we're talking about pensions and when should pensions be started or what option. Like all of these things, it's not just, again, in a silo. They all work together. And that's why there's a lot of complexity. And you want to make sure that it's all working together real smoothly. And that's the work that we get to do, is trying to just keep things from a cash flow standpoint, from a tax standpoint, from an estate, like keeping all this machine moving together and working well so that you can have clarity, confidence, and freedom.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you for tuning in to Sound Retirement Radio. For articles, links, and resources from today's show, visit soundretirementplanning.com. If you enjoy the podcast, share it with a friend and give us a 5-star review. Ready to kickstart your retirement planning? Head over to retirementbudgetcalculator.com. Need assistance with investment management? Explore our services at parker-financial.net. Information and opinions expressed here are believed to be accurate and complete, for general information only, and should not be construed as specific tax, legal, or financial advice for any individual, and does not constitute a solicitation for any securities or insurance products. Please consult with your financial professional before taking action on anything discussed in this program. Parker Financial, its representatives, or its affiliates have no liability for investment decisions or other actions taken or made by you based on the information provided in this program. All insurance-related discussions are subject to the claims-paying ability of the company. Investing involves risk. Jason Parker is the president of Parker Financial, LLC, an independent fee-based wealth management firm located at 9230 Bayshore Drive Northwest, Suite 201, Silverdale, Washington. For additional information, call 360-337-2701 or visit us online at soundretirementplanning.com.